Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the second story from chapter 19 of the Road to Latin textbook. So this story is called Tulia et Liberi, so Tulia and her children. So before you dive in, I know this is the second story of chapter 19, so you should at this point have the vocab and the grammar under control, from reading the previous story. But in case you don't, make sure you go back. You really are going to have a hard time reading through the story and understanding it and translating it if you don't know what the words mean. So always start with the vocab and then have a good grasp with the grammar too, just so you can make a lot of sense of it and you're not constantly looking up words or trying to figure out what words mean. The other thing I always tell you, if you can find someone to read this to, again, find a partner, read it aloud, work on your speaking and pronunciation, and have them read it back to you. So ideally, if you can find another student or a classmate, someone who can read it and they can work on their pronunciation, you can work on your listening skills. You never want to shut those off. They will help you, understand this language as you go. And you'd be surprised how quickly you'll catch the patterns and really get a sense of what's going on when you're listening to the story too. The other thing, if you want to find any resources, check out my website. Like I always tell you, it's got grammar help, vocab, it's got the notes. It has this story, you can see it with the cases highlighted. You can find a translation, just different things to help you out. So feel free to take a look if that helps you work your way through the book. But once you're in that place and you feel pretty good, you should read through the story, and that's what we're going to do now, right? Dive into it and try to make some sense of it. And if you want to double check your work, that's what this video is for, to make sure you're on the right track. So the story starts with this. You have quid heri agebatis liberi, rogat Tulia. So she's saying, what, right? What were you doing yesterday? So agebatis, it's the verb agere, can mean to lead. It doesn't really mean what were you leading. That's kind of an odd way of putting it. It really is more the idea of what were you doing, right? Or what did you do, you might say. But since it's imperfect tense, you can say what were you doing? And heri just means yesterday, right? Liberi is the vocative. So she's saying, what were you doing yesterday, children? Tulia asks. She's talking to her kids. And they respond. You have in peristilo cum pedagogo sedebamus respondent liberi. So the children respond, right? Respondent liberi. And they say, sedebamus, we were sitting in peristilo, in the peristyle, cum pedagogo, with our tutor, right? Remember, the pedagogus is the tutor. So sedebamus there is imperfect tense. You can tell by the BA, the MUS means we were doing it. So we were sitting. Then it continues. You have pedagogus fabulam veram de templis graecis narrabat. So our tutor, or the tutor, you could say, pedagogus, there's your subject, was telling, narrabat, imperfect tense, right? You can tell by the BA and its active voice. So he was telling, what was he telling? A fabulam veram, a true story about templis graecis, right? About Greek temples. And this is referencing the first story in chapter 19. Where the tutor does teach the boys all about Greek temples, right? So they say he was telling us a story about Greek temples. Then Tulia says, amabasne fabulam parve servi. So rogat Tulia. So Tulia asks, did you or were you liking, right? You could even say, did you like? The BA makes it imperfect. The S means she's talking to someone, right? You, singular. Did you like the story, the fabulam? Who's she talking to? The vocative tells you that. Parve servi. So little Servius. So that's one of the children. She says, did you like the story, little Servius? And then you have the response in the next part. You have ego fabulam amabam Tulia, respondet Servius. So she says, did you like the story, little Servius? And he responds, right? He says, I liked the story. And again, amabam is imperfect tense because it was over a period of time, right? So you have to envision that the story took, 5, 10 minutes, whatever. And during that time, he was liking it. You could translate this as I was liking the story, but it probably makes more sense to just make it like a simple past tense verb and just say, I liked the story. Fabulam is your direct object. Tulia is vocative. So he responds and he says, I like the story, Tulia, responds Servius. Then you have habitabantne dei et dei in templis. So the subject is dei et dei, gods and goddesses. The verb is habitabant, which is imperfect, right? You can tell by the BA, and it's active voice. So the habitabant means they were living. The any on the end of it means you're asking a yes or no question, right? And he's not sure what the answer is. So it's a legitimate yes or no question. So you could almost translate this as, did the gods and goddesses live? Literally, it says gods and goddesses were living, or were they living? But you could say, did they live? So did gods and goddesses live in temples? In temples? So he's asking, he's saying, we learned all about Greek temples. Did the gods and goddesses live in them? And she responds, it says, non in templis, sed in Olimpo dei et dei habitabant servi. So she says, not in temples, but in Olympus, or you could say on Olympus. This is referring to Mount Olympus, right? So maybe on Olympus is a good way to do it. Your subject, again, is dei et dei, gods and goddesses, habitaban, they were living, or they lived, you could say. Ser we hear is vocative. She's talking to Servius. So she says, if you kind of reverse the whole order and redo it again, she's saying gods and goddesses lived not in temples, but on Olympus, Servius. So she's correcting him and saying they don't live in temples, they live on Mount Olympus. Right? Then he says, quid dei et dei in Olympo agebant, Tulia? So quid means what? So she says, oh yeah, they lived on Mount Olympus, right? He says, what did gods and goddesses do, right? Agebant, again, it's imperfect, so you could say, what were they doing? Or you could just say, what did they do? It would still be fine. But what did the gods and goddesses do on Mount Olympus, Tulia? Now she responds in the next part. She says, Dei et Dei incolas terrarum curaban et consilia regebant. So the gods and goddesses, that's my subject, they curaban, they were taking care of, or they took care of, incolas terrarum, the incolas, the inhabitants, terrarum is genitive plural, of the earth. So she's saying they take care of, or they took care of, the inhabitants of the world, or the inhabitants of the earth. And regebant, they were, you could say they were ruling, but it almost means like they were guiding is kind of one way to do it. Consilia, plans, right? They were kind of giving plans, or maybe you could even say like directing plans, or guiding plans. It means they're offering advice and they're telling people what to do, right, is the idea. Then you have Zeus maximus deus erat, reliquos deus et deas de consiliis monebat. So Zeus, here we have the first reference to to one of the gods. You have Zeus. He was the maximus deus, right? He was the greatest god. So Zeus was the greatest god. He, monebat, he advised, you could say he was advising, it's imperfect tense, but you could say he advised the reliquos deus et deas, the other gods and goddesses, about their plans, right? Consilis, about the their plans and things they were going to do. So he advises them, right? So the idea is he's the greatest god. When they come to him with their plans, their consilia, he's the one who kind of guides them and advises them on what they should do. Then you have tamen discordia inter incolas Olympi saipe venieba. So, however, discord, right, is one way to translate, right? Discord among the inhabitants, inter incolas, among the inhabitants of Olympus, right? Olympi there is genitive. Often, venieba, often was coming. So you could say, often discord came, you could translate venieba, came among the inhabitants of Olympus. Who are the inhabitants of Olympus? The gods, right? The gods and goddesses. So Tulia is saying here, yes, they are gods and goddesses, but they often fight with each other, which is true, right? The Greek and even the Roman gods and goddesses, they never really agree on everything. There's always discord, right? So they argue a lot. Then you have discordia vero erat causa belli Trojani. So discord, right? Vero means like truly. So truly, discord was the causa, right? Erat means it was. Causa means cause. So discord was the cause of the Trojan War, the belli Trojani. Right, which is where we were talking about already, right? It says discord was the cause of the Trojan War. It's a funny way of saying it, because discord can mean like disagreement, but there is actually a god or a goddess of discord. And this is referring to the disagreement over the apple, right? So the beginning of the Trojan War is the fight over who's the fairest, and you have the golden apple being rolled in, and the goddess is fighting over who it's for. That's kind of what this is referencing. And again, look up, we did a little bit about the Trojan War already in this book. You can look it up and you'll get what what's being referenced here. So it's talking about the gods, the goddesses, and how they often fight, which is very true. The Greek pantheon has very human elements rather. They argue, they fight. They kind of represent a family, and they show kind of human emotions in that way. So just something to think about. Then we continue with this last part. And you have none, right? So surely. You have none, ludi magister heri fabulum de bello Trojano narabat luci. So the none again is surely. So it's saying surely the magister ludi, the teacher of school, your school teacher is really what it means. the school teacher, Naraba, was telling yesterday, Harry. So, she's saying, surely yesterday your school teacher was telling a fabula, a story, De Bello Troiano, right, about the Trojan War. And Luci is Lucius, right? That's the vocative. So she's saying almost like, surely, Lucius, the school teacher was telling you a story yesterday about the Trojan War, right? The none there, the surely means that she's asking this, and it's implying that the answer will be yes, right? So you could almost think in English, she's like, he told you a story about the Trojan War, right? You're anticipating a yes answer. And then you do get the answer. You get certe, right? Certe heri fabulas de bello Troiano et de Patroclo Naraba. So yeah, certainly, right? Certe, of course. Yesterday, Narabat, he was telling fabulas, stories, de bello Troiano, about the Trojan War, at de Patroclo, and about Patroclus. So this is referencing the previous chapter where we heard these stories about, the fight amongst the Greeks and Patroclus and kind of how he got killed, and with Achilles, that whole thing. That's what they're referencing here. Then the last thing in this chapter, the last line in this story anyway, is erant fabulae boni. They were erant good stories, fabulae boni, right? Meaning he liked them. He says, yeah, they were really good stories. Remember, the kids like these stories. So that's all there is in this second story. It's not particularly long. It's trying to help you understand the imperfect tense and getting more reps on that, and a little bit about the mythology, the gods and goddesses in the Greek and Roman pantheon. And you're getting a glimpse into how they work. And I'd encourage you to look it up, right, with their temples, the gods and goddesses, how Romans think of them. That's all kind of tied in here to the culture unit. So I'd encourage you to look at that as you go. And I can put a link to one of the culture units I use in my class, and hopefully that'll get you on the right track. But the key thing here, the grammar, is really the imperfect tense. It's talking about things in the past, things that happened over a period of time, and you want to look at how we're translating it. There's a couple different ways you can do it, but as long as you're getting the right idea, you should be okay. And the context kind of guides you in that direction. So hopefully this made sense. If there's anything in here that you're not sure of, or anything that you want explained in more detail, feel free to put a comment below and I'll be happy to help you. But otherwise, keep reading it. Again, use the read and reread method. If you read through this once and it doesn't make sense, try to look up any words you don't know or grammar you don't know, and then read it again. The more you read it, the more comfortable you're going to be. You'll catch the patterns. You'll be more familiar with the grammar. And hopefully you want to hit a point where you can read the story without having to look anything up and understand it. That's how you know you're in a really good place. Good luck.